Saludos y buenas noches. Aquí Frances, fundadora de Latinas Emprendiendo. Hoy, viernes, con nuestro primer Virtual Meetup aquí en Latinas Emprendiendo. Saludos para los que nos sintonizan por primera vez. Mi nombre es Frances González, fundadora de Latinas Emprendiendo, organización sin fines de lucro que tiene como misión inspirar, educar y elevar a nuestra comunidad, resaltando la educación, activismo y emprendimientos de mujeres en la industria. A través de nuestras diferentes iniciativas, damos herramientas educativas para mujeres que quieren crecer y emprender en esta industria verde. Una de nuestras iniciativas son los ambassadors, nuestro programa de embajadoras, donde actualmente tenemos embajadoras en diferentes países de Latinoamérica, como México, Perú, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, Estados Unidos, y también nuestra iniciativa de nuestro fondo de inversión, donde nuestra meta es, a través de este fondo, otorgar becas educativas para mujeres que quieran emprender en la industria del cannabis. Y esto es posible gracias a nuestros aliados y colaboradores, en especial a Millennial Solutions, compañía que brinda soluciones digitales para la industria del cannabis, y nuestros Eleva sponsors. Para más detalles e información pueden visitar nuestra página latinascanapreneurs.com para que conozcan sobre nuestros diferentes aliados, sponsors y colaboradores. Así que en la noche de hoy, Latinas Emprendiendo Virtual Meetup es especial, ya que estamos en el mes del Black History Month, lo que es la cultura afro-latina, celebrando lo que es la cultura afro-latina en Estados Unidos, y por eso queremos resaltar a 3 afro-latinas en la industria del cannabis. Una de ellas es Tamara Rivera. Tamara, ella es bartender, ella es una afro-latina de acá de Puerto Rico. Desafortunadamente, pues en la noche de hoy no pudo estar con nosotros por problemas personales, pero si quieren conocer más de ellas, en nuestra página latinascanapreneurs.com tenemos un recuento. Ella fue panelista en nuestra Virtual Meetup de bartenders boricuas, y ella es una de las afro-latinas que está trabajando en la industria del cannabis. Ella, además de ser bartender, técnico de dispensario, también ella es activista, es canamadre, educadora y escritora para varios diferentes medios de comunicación en Puerto Rico. Así que, pues lamentamos que ella no pudo estar en la noche de hoy con nosotros, pero pueden conocer más sobre ella y sobre su labor como afro-latina en la industria del cannabis en Puerto Rico. También, pues, en la noche de hoy tenemos a Samantha Martins. Samantha Martins, ella es una activista educadora. Ella es una educadora de Estados Unidos. Ella es de descendencia puertorriqueña y dominicana, pero vive en Estados Unidos. Es una afro-latina que es una activista y defiende y educa sobre todos los beneficios que se encuentran en esta planta fémina. Y pues como afro-latina le invitamos para que nos explicara un poco más sobre su reto, su trayectoria, y cómo ella pues conoce y llega a esta planta. Así que vamos entonces a estar con Samantha. Saludos, Samantha. Hi, beautiful.
Okay, there we are. Hola, hola. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias por estar. Thank you for being today with us. Esto va a ser en Spanglish. We're Afro-Latinas, we're no Latinas.
Ya tú sabes.
Así que
voy a decir lo que puedo en español y también en inglés. I'll do, Spanish, typical, New Yorkican Spanglish situation.
Super. So I'm going to do a little bit in English also, in Spanish. Les estaba comentando that we met, Samantha and I actually met in New York. It was, again, that's one of the benefits of networking and connecting. Conectar es bien importante. Nosotros nos conocimos en Nueva York en un evento de High Garden, que también es liderado por latinos, por mujeres en la industria del cannabis. So we met in that event, High Garden event in New York, and we connected through the plant. That's why it's so beautiful how this cannabis plant just creates the community, crea esta comunidad y crea este ambiente de conexión. Exactly. So Samantha, thank you for being with us tonight. Tell us a little bit about you, about where you're at right now and the legality of cannabis where you are.
Yes. So I am in the Bronx, New York. So shout out to everyone del Bronx who's watching. Thank you for being here. Yeah, so here in New York, thankfully, cannabis is legal. It was just legalized for adult use this past March 2021. Which was, a miracle, especially, someone who's, born and raised in the Bronx here, on Montse, Lenape, and Wappinger land, right? To be able to see this beautiful shift. I think everyone knows, right, whether you're from New York or not, that there's been, many communities and populations here have been very, very drastically affected by the war on drugs. Really hardcore, the South Bronx, with the opioid crisis, right? So to see this plant now be legal for us to be able to consume without having to look over our shoulder for the police, right? Without having to worry about getting incarcerated for this, right? It's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. And, I definitely don't take it lightly. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so humbling, because there's many people who fought, who fought for this and who aren't here to see the change. But it's, one of my favorite quotes, right? It's like the day you plant the seed is not the day you bear the fruit, right? Que todo tiene su tiempo, right? Everything happens in its time. And whether or not you're there to see the results or not, like, it's still worth it to fight, right? To put the effort, to like keep going, to keep speaking, teaching, educating, advocating, because it's not just about us right now. It's like also about what we're setting up for, well, we're not here, that we just continue to push things forward, hopefully. So it's great that, yeah, weed's legal here. So,
yes, I know that transition.
It's like 420 month in 2022. I know it's gonna be crazy here. It's gonna be amazing. I'm so excited. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's amazing.
I know you mentioned that, like you said, just last year, New York went full recreational. O sea, el año pasado fue que New York legalizó recreacionalmente el cannabis. And like you said, that transition, not a lot of people get to reap the benefits. No muchas personas conocen de, pues ahora que es legal, we still have people in jail because of cannabis. Y eso es una realidad que todavía tenemos.
Exacto.
Gente presa por cannabis.
And like there's no reason for it, especially in states where it's legal. You know what I mean? And that's like the crazy part. It's like, imagínate, your life has been destroyed and you're still paying the price for it, and you get to see other people build whole lives and generate profit from the same thing that you were punished for. Like that should, like, we shouldn't even be having this discussion at this point anymore, right? Like all these folks should have been already, like set free and records expunged. Pero aquí estamos todavía luchando.
Sí, luchando.
But we have a medical program. Like we've had a medical program. I'm actually also a New York medical patient, a medical marijuana patient. And I was, I've been glad to have access to that as well. Even pre-adult use legalization. But even that, like the cost of entry, like there's so many things that like drive me so crazy, because it's like even like application fees and things like that. Like there's so many folks even just buying cannabis. You know what I'm saying? Like yo gasto que entre 200, 400 por mes para mi medicina. Pero if I was on antidepressants like I was before, or anti-anxiety, whatever, like insurance covers that, right? Like, but I have to now like literally spend hundreds of my own dollars, because for me, like I'm grateful that I have the ability and the privilege to be able to be like, no, like my weed's non-negotiable. Like that's my medicine, and I absolutely am going to make sure that I have what I need to be able to get that. But like not a lot of people have that, you know.
No, it's out of pocket, and it's easier, like you say. Now with medical insurance, it's easier to get into the narcotics of it or antidepressants,
right?
Than a plant. It's just the fact that
it's because I've been, you know, I also suffer from chronic pain. So my medical diagnosis is PTSD and chronic pain. I have arthritis and, you know, some other stuff that I'm still figuring out. But you know, it's like it's so crazy to me, and I still have the pain pills sitting in my cabinet, you know, and it's like, wow, like it's so easy for me to get this like prescribed like this, you know, sedative that's gonna just like make it and like not function, so that I can just like not feel pain so that I could sleep, right? Because insomnia is also something I battled with that the cannabis has also helped me with, you know, and it's like, you know, I can pump myself up with this thing that's like ultimately going to be wreaking havoc on my body over time, right? Because it's not necessarily something that's, you know, restorative or reparative for our bodies the way that like cannabis is. Like our bodies are literally meant to process this plant. Like
we have an endocannabinoid system
is like built for this. Like our bodies literally are meant to have a relationship with this plant and process it. And I'm just so thankful that this alternative has worked for me, right? And like it's no judgment against anyone who like chooses, you know, alternate, you know, things like pharmaceuticals or whatever, but it's just like a matter of giving people options and access. And the fact that like families, you know, human beings, you know, like we have to travel across state lines, risking a lot, right? Because it's illegal to try, you know, just to access medicine, you know, that like a family has to like uproot their life to get this life-saving medicine for their like child with epilepsy or something, you know. It's like, it's just so fucked up. It's so fucked up. And you know, this literally like is the fight. And like one of the things that I'm really passionate about is like educating people about the plant, but also like reminding people that it's important for us to like fight ultimately for choice, right? Because it's like, it's one thing if you're able to choose A or B, but when the government or the powers that be or the systems in place are saying like, no, we're not going to give you this choice, and like this is what you're going to get and that's it, and then like demonize this whole other plant, like we're just like, none of that shit is based in any truth, because science has proven time and time again that this is a beneficial plant.
It's so contradicting at times that it does cause that confusion, and that's why we have to continue educating. And I love the work that you do. But before, you know, the activism takes over, tell us a little bit about how you first knew about the plant. ¿Cómo tú conociste la planta? How was that, you know, journey into, you know, the cannabis experience and the cannabis wellness que te trae la planta?
Sí. Well, so it's a funny story. Because before I was not about this life. I was not 420 friendly.
Wow, you see the journey, the origin story.
Never say never. That's been my biggest life lesson, because I would never smoke weed. I would never. Y mírame ahora. Pa' que tú veas. But that was rooted in like the lack of education, the stigma, like the fear that I grew up with around this plant, you know, especially in El Bronx, you know, where like there's like a huge, you know, like opioid, you know, fucking crisis still, you know, and in the South, and you know, growing up like, you know, Latina también, you know, where there's like this negative association with like people of color using this plant. And you know, so of course, like I grew up with that, like, you know, don't do drugs, like don't do this, or da da da. Oh, you smell that? That's the, you know, like very, you know, anti-weed kind of thoughts and things, you know. So of course, when that's what I'm growing up with and hearing like, oh, this is a terrible thing, it could ruin your life, like all those things, you know, cuando alguien te dice, mira, no hagas eso, que eso te va a matar, o bla, 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 tú no lo vas a hacer.
Nuestra familia, that's how we kind of were raised into, no, eso es malo, eso es droga, no se usa.
Qué miedo. Yo dije, ay, no, yo no puedo hacer eso, porque mira, eso me va a matar, o mi papá me va a matar. Mientras que yo,
la pela va.
So I was like, I'm not trying it, you know, like, but, you know, flash forward, what really brought me to it was like when my mental health brought me to to my knees. Basically, I suffer from severe depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, and I was feeling like, okay, I think it might be time to just see a psychiatrist because I really cannot do this. But I was like, wait, I did hear that this weed thing could possibly help. Why don't let me actually do some research? And at the time, this was like in the early 2000s, and there still wasn't a lot. There still wasn't as much information and knowledge as now in like 2022. You know what I mean? Like where now there is so much access. Now there are so many more folks, and there's been people doing this work long before me. But like now, like I think living in the digital age and like having that privilege of access to technology and information and being able to like dive in and gather what I can, it made me feel a little better. It made me feel, once I started reading more and understanding like, oh, this is how it could potentially affect my body and my brain and blah blah blah. I always love to go into the rabbit hole. Like when I get curious about something, I'm like studying it all the time. Especially as like a psych student as well. I'm like, wait, I need to know what's going to happen. So, I was really able to approach the plan from a much more informed place. And for me, that's what made me feel safe to be able to like turn to it with a different energy. Cause I had like taken like a hit or two, like a couple years before I actually started consuming just to try it and just like, okay, let me see. But I still was approaching it with
that mentality, with that negative connotation.
Sí, con tanto miedo y como, ay no, yo no sé, ay, que yo no sé si pasó nada. Tal vez sí, tal vez no sé, pero con tanto miedo como yo, like I didn't allow the plant to maybe do what it needed to do because I was really blocking it with fear,
Mm-hmm.
And once, again, flash forward, I was like, okay, I really don't have anything to lose. I could go this pharmaceutical route and like maybe it'll be okay, but I'd rather find a natural alternative. Again, nothing against folks who go that route, but for me, I know that there are other tools that have helped me. Like I've tried that route, that didn't help, and I know like it's plant medicine for me, and I remember copying my first dub by myself. En un apartamento en el Bronx, como todo el mundo hace, que, un amigo de un amigo me dijo, mira, y me fui, con una amiga porque yo no quería ir sola tampoco. Tú sabes, like,
claro.
I'm getting weed for the first time, like I can't do this by myself, like let me get my friend to come with me. And I did, and I went to her house because at the time I was living with my parents, so there was like no way that I could smoke at home. Went to her house and I rolled up. My sister taught me to roll up. She was like my guide, mi hermanita.
Your sister, mira para allá.
The best, mi hermanita. She's only 4 years younger than me, and she has a whole kid and everything. But I'm like, that's my baby sister. But she taught me. She taught her big sis how to roll a joint, blah blah blah. I smoked, and it was like just everything changed. Everything changed. The way that I was able to kind of think and process and just approach life, it was like a whole door opened up. You know what I mean? Like what was so locked in fear and like trapped, it was like, and that really supported my healing, with my mental health, with my physical health. So yeah, it was really like my ailing mental health that brought me to this plant, and I'm so grateful that like I found it when I did, because it really saved and changed my life. So that's how I got to it. Of course, I hid my consumption for many years,
wow.
from my parents, because of course, what I mean?
Yes, the stigma and that, that involves, that affects us so much, because a veces, como tú dices, that first experience for you, because you were, so many stigmas and so many negative connotation, that reaction didn't allow you to actually, obtener los beneficios de la planta. So, and it's not until later on that you feel like, were you in any type of opioids when you tried it?
No, I wasn't. Yeah, I was like, this was like the first, besides alcohol was the only drug that I've ever had. And I am saying that because we forget, like, alcohol is a fucking drug. Alcohol is like crazy toxic. Like it could literally kill
so
you.
Toxic.
Weed, no recorded deaths from weed, but whatever. But nobody wants to talk about that, right? Like governments and whatever, they want to ignore that. But you know, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, this was my first experience with like a psychedelic, you know, like with a really kind of like different mind altering substance. And it was, you know, and again, I was so afraid of that too. Like I knew that it was a whole different thing from alcohol. You know what I mean? Like I had the experience of it, like I knew it was gonna happen. So, you know, obviously like that little bit of fear, like prior to me finally fully embracing weed, it was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. You know, I don't like, you know what, it's like, you don't know, but it's like, you know, uno nunca sabe hasta que uno trata, right? Like you never know till you try, you never know till you do the thing, and then you find out, okay, this is cool, this is for me or it's not for me. Like with weed, I didn't know, you know, I was like, okay, this might work, or it might be like, no, this isn't, maybe this isn't for me right now. But it worked, and I'm like, changed my life. I went from being no weed to now I'm like, you know, the weed evangelist.
So that's it. So that's the next question. That's a great, you know, intro for the next question, because you started it for, you know, your well-being, your wellness, you know, your different conditions and treatments. Pero entonces evolucionó a toda esta advocacy work, a todo este trabajo de activismo, de educación. So when did that transition go from, or how did you realize that, okay, yo lo utilizo para mí, pero ahora I want to educate and let people know how this plan is, you know, for my well-being y cómo le puede beneficiar a ellos también?
Sí. I mean, honestly, very recently, you know, hace nada más como tal vez 2 años ya que comencé a hablar de la planta, you know, more openly, more in the public, you know, like where I wasn't like hiding it so much.
And what triggered that? Why did you decide to not be so private and be more vocal about your cannabis use?
Because it came to a point, you know, bueno, right, 2020 to 2020 for everyone all over the world was life-changing, right? For better, for worse. Like it was a huge catalyst for so many things. And it really was like in that moment, right, having, you know, like become unemployed, right? Because I went from like teaching, you know, yoga classes all over the city, because that is like, you know, my work as well. Like I've been teaching yoga for, you know, a decade, practicing for over a decade. You know, I often integrate that as well, you know, into the practice, because there is also like a rich history and connection between yoga and cannabis as well, you know. So yeah, it wasn't until like maybe 2019, actually, I'll say 2019, that I started to like teach more about CBD and like incorporate that and teach, you know, CBD classes. And I still didn't, even though I knew that, I was like, okay, maybe this is a direction I could go. Like I still wasn't fully like, oh yes, I absolutely know that, like, you know, weed is part of my life purpose. You know, it's just like testing the waters. Flash forward 2020, you know, it's like, holy fuck, like I'm unemployed. Who the fuck knows what's gonna happen? You know, the world is fucking on fire, like everything, you know. I was like, I don't know what direction to go in. What do I do? Like, do I pursue this thing? Do I not? You know, and all those kind of questions and battles, right? As a freelancer, as a creative, like tú sabes, you know, like as a one person, pretty much like business owner and show and a creator, you're like, you know, voy a seguir o no? And
wow.
and it came to that point where I'm like, you know what? I literally have nothing to lose. I have no reason to be ashamed about my use, because there was that, you know, eso también avergüenza, que aunque, you know, ya, bueno, como 7 años ya, it's very recent that I've been a cannabis consumer. It's only been like about 7 years. So not super long. Like, just sitting with all of that, like, why am I hiding this shit? Like, why? What is the reason? And unpacking.
And why did you? What, and you know, in your mind, what were the reasons that
there's nothing to be ashamed about? You know what I mean? Like, you know, the same way some folks might choose something else as medicine, I choose something else. Some folks choose to, like, you know, have a glass of wine or two at night. I choose, to smoke my joint and listen to music. And like, it doesn't make me a shitty person. It doesn't make me irresponsible. All those things que, todo el mundo puede consumir esta planta. Todo el mundo. There's no need to stigmatize the consumers or like create, like hierarchies. You know what I'm saying? Like it's cool if you smoke if you're, a single person, with no kids, but like if you smoke weed and you're a mom, you're terrible and irresponsible. Like, no, that it's not this or that. It's like it's literally for anyone and everyone. Because from the beginning of time, right, our ancestors, right, everyone, like it was the plants. Medicina de la planta.
La medicina de la planta, eso es lo que yo siempre le comento. Nuestras abuelitas, like our grandmas y nuestras abuelitas, eso es lo que hacían. De medicina, las plantas, sí, manzanilla. I remember my grandma, picking up the plants to make tea for my stomach ache or for a migraña. Like, I don't know what it was, but I trusted my grandma. And she did, and it worked. And it's going back to, like you say, to plant medicine. Our doctors, nuestros doctores, no estudian herbología, no estudian botanists, which it was something that it was part of the curriculum because that's where our medicine came from. So going back to the roots and like you say, like not being ashamed because we shouldn't. It's something that brings us wellness. Y eso es algo que we want to definitely highlight and advocate about. Que we should not have to feel ashamed for smoking, which sometimes I do. Like I still have that, oh my God, I'm smoking, because
yo también todavía, y con mis padres también todavía. Y yo digo, pero ven acá, yo soy una mujer ya. Like, come on now. Like, why am I? But like now we're no longer like, todo el mundo sabe ya, I made that decision to just, come out to my parents about, weed, because again, it was like, this is fucking stupid. I'm a grown ass woman. Why am I hiding my lifestyle? Especially something that like, if this improves my quality of life, like that's something to celebrate. You know what I mean? That's not something to criticize and to shame, So it was like, I had to do a lot of my own kind of like, like really releasing and shedding all that like shit, you know what I mean? Like all the projections from like, parents, family, society saying that this is bad or dangerous or whatever. And I also felt like, if there's a job or, or a community or people or whoever that like don't want to work with me or like that want to judge me or shame me or whatever for consuming cannabis, then fuck that. Like, I don't want to be a part of it, and that was such a beautiful relief too, to really like be that centered in myself, to be like, you know what, I'm going to absolutely make it super public that this is like what I want to do and share. And, it really ties into with like everything else that I do in my life and my lifestyle with mindful movement and meditation and like my spiritual practice and work and, my mental health and like my creative work as well. Cause I'm also a writer and a musician and all these things. Like it just helps me live, as a better person and a more fulfilled life. And, it's funny because just going back to that part about stigma and just going public, I was so worried also about going public because I'm also a teacher. I teach yoga to elementary schoolers. So like also that fear and stigma of like, oh my God, if I am found out to be consuming this, am I going to lose my livelihood? And that's real. That's really real because this is the world that we live in. This is the country that we live in. So like, I understand why a lot of people, especially like I don't have kids. So at least I never have to worry about, at least right now, currently, I don't have to worry about, God forbid, ACS knocking on my door, and because I know plenty of people who've had those situations and like, and they are the most amazing parents in the whole world, but because they're cannabis consumers, they have to deal with that bullshit. So it's like I feel like the more that all sorts of folks, if they're able to safely do so, because I do understand that like everyone doesn't necessarily have the safety to be public, right? And sharing whatever. But for those of us who do, it's so important to show the diverse community of consumers, whether you're parents, whether you're an abuelita, whether, you know, you're a 7-year-old who's epileptic and like literally needs to consume this, you know what I'm saying? It's like removing stigmas, right? Because it's like there's people that literally would rather have this child suffer than give them weed.
And that is sad that we still have.
Eso me rompe el corazón.
Sí, y es bien triste the fact that, again, tenemos una industria, we have an industry, a profitable, very profitable industry. But again, hay madres, like you say, that have to worry because they're consuming cannabis for their well-being, because they're great moms. O sea, por eso es que tenemos que romper el estigma de que el cannabis es malo. Al contrario, te da balance. It makes you patient, tolerant, o sea, especialmente como mujer, because we have so many different roles that we're involved in, and it's made acceptable, the glass of wine, but it's not made acceptable, you know, the joint. And that's something that we definitely need to break the stigma and educate. So tell us a little bit about your business, because I know you do different things, you do yoga. So tell us about how, you know, that came up to be and how you included, you know, the cannabis to be part out of your classes and all of the wellness.
Yeah, so it's just so beautiful. Everything has just kind of come together and fallen into place, because like that was one of my dilemmas, right? Like even like a year ago, right? That was one of my dilemmas. Like, okay, like I know that I absolutely still want to share, you know, the yoga and like mindful movement and meditation and breath work, you know, practices. I definitely know that I want to like integrate music back into my life in some way. I definitely know that I want to like teach people, you know, just like even if it's just like the most basic stuff, whether it's like, hey, like here are the cannabis laws in New York, right? Because it's important to know your rights. Like as soon as the MRT, like I posted the NYPD's, you know, like breakdown of like what you can get away with, you know, here in New York City, because a lot of people don't know, and people just kept asking me, and I was like, okay, here it is, boom, know your rights, know what you can get away with, this shit is lit, like this is awesome, like stay informed, you know. So it's, you know, I wanted to keep doing all those things, like writing as well, like that's another thing that that's part of like my life and practice as well. And I was like, how can I do this, and like what's like the centerpiece of it all? And it's like weed. You know what I mean? Like weed is just kind of like it's
revolves around it. It's the center.
And it just like speaks to like the intersectionality as well of like the plants that, like, you know, no matter what you're doing, what you're creating, where you're coming from, it's like there's so many avenues that you can take, right? Whether it's like maybe opening up your dispensary, maybe it's being like a consultant and an educator, like there's so many roles, right? Advocacy, activism, teaching, like, you know, even how you shop, right? Like supporting, you know, women-owned business, Latino-owned business, Black business, right? Like all those things, like there's ways that everyone has a role in this, whether it's like on the front lines, you know, or like, you know, in the background, like it's all important and all the in-between. And for me, like integrating yoga with cannabis has been just amazing. Like it's even helped me shift the way that like I practice and show up as well. And you know, so I love teaching my you know, cannabis integrated, you know, classes, because I feel like that also just facilitates such a deeper level of like self-awareness, because, you know, even in the Atharva Veda, which is like one of the sacred texts, a super ancient sacred Hindu text, it lists cannabis, excuse me, as one of the 5 essential plants, right? So in Ayurveda, the sister science of yoga, like really dives into more like, you know, dietary things, right? Foods, you know, practices, like, you know, energetic stuff. Like it's the kind of non-physical side, but also very like scientific and spiritual. And the fact that like this text, it's like an ancient text. Like I'm trying to think like of an analogy for like, or like it's almost like a biblical text. Like it's not a Bible, but you know what I mean? It's like on that kind of like ancient text that's like saying like this is like one of the most essential plants. Like this is a highly beneficial plant for us, you know, and cannabis is the only plant that can like house you, you know, feed you, clothe you, right? Like it's so multidimensional, you know, and I really use that into my approach and how I approach my work. Like, how can I, or where and what kind of communities do I want to align with? I want to keep aligning with very conscious communities, communities that understand, you know, the injustices that are going around this plant and its people, right? You know, working with women in weed, like that's been a huge part. So, you know, going back to how I said, like, okay, I'm doing yoga, cool. Now, how can I, you know, continue to bring music into my life? I've been curating, you know, playlists like for Smoke Break Co., which is amazing. You know, things like that, like being able to collaborate with other like musically and artistically inclined folks around like this plant as well. Writing, I'm working on a current article for this, you know, woman owned and BIPOC and Latina owned cannabis brands that I'm really excited about. So like there's that, and it's like, wow, like I'm able to do all the things that I've been wanting to do and share, because I really hate feeling limited, right? Like I felt like, okay, should I just stick to yoga or no? Or like, should I just stick to like really getting into cannabis and educating? Like, no. Should I just do this? No. Like, I want to do it all. Like, I can, you know, everything in bits and pieces, but like that it's possible. Like, we are multidimensional. Like, we can, you know, navigate the different things and do all the different things, and things actually like work out, you know, and shape up. So I'm so happy that like I didn't give up on myself when it came to that. You know what I'm saying? Especially during the pandemic, where it's like at that point everyone's like freaking out and like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, do I give up on these dreams? Do I give up on these curiosities? But it was like, no, like I was just getting started, you know, and being able to virtually, because a lot of the cannabis, a lot of my friends and beautiful supporters and connections, you know, and mentors in the cannabis community, I met online. Like I met them online. You know,
I know, we were one of them.
Right. And we stayed, you know, connecting, just DMing back and forth and all of that until, you know, Jess Gonzalez, hey, shout out Jess, until she was like, hey, do you know each other? Like, da, 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 you know, because she knew we had like, you know, that Boricua connection, and that you know, like also had ties in the Bronx and this and that. And we were like, yes. So it's just beautiful that like, again, like over the past, you know, year and a half, I was able to like cultivate such strong connections and like being able to like put myself out there, to now seeing like all these things start to like play out, you know, like this tonight, you know, and I was like, oh my God, I love this. Like, this is what I love to do. This is what I'm here for, you know, and being able to get all these different opportunities in the different realms, you know, like I'll be, you know, teaching a yoga class, you know, for you know, Curaleaf, you know, soon at some point, because they're getting ready to launch a product. So like things like that it's like, oh yeah, like I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that. And like this beautiful plant has allowed me to know and understand and remember that like there are no rules really, right?
There
Like,
are no limits, no hay
like,
límites a lo que podemos
like it's
hacer.
not black or white, like it's not this or that. It's like we truly can find a way to like, you know, to work with it in a way that works for us, right? Even when it comes to consumption, like not everybody likes smoking, right? Not everyone likes inhalation. That's okay. Here are other methods, right? Here's thing, you know, like everyone can still get the benefit of the plant, you know, in its intoxicating or non-intoxicating form, right? It's like it's such a like it's such a broad.
It's broad, and the
that
beautiful
just
thing.
scratches the surface.
And the beautiful thing about it, como tú dices, es que there's no limit. No hay por qué ponernos límites en lo que podemos hacer, because that's the beauty about the cannabis industry. There's so many things that we as women could aportar, we could bring to the table. Our knowledge, again, we're the shoppers, the buyers when it comes to our what comes into our home. So we have so much information that it's needed, and through the platforms como tú y diferentes mujeres y diferentes latinas, that we could definitely encourage and be able to be an example for other women también, que maybe they are not able to be public about it because their moms are, again, they've got stigmas or X, Y, and Z, but we are able to represent them and support them and say, hey, it's okay, puedes darte tu porro if you don't like to smoke. Hay tinturas, hay comestibles, there's edibles, there's so many things that could help you, and they're even more, you know, beneficial than, again, all the the opioids and the different fármacos that are introduced into the body. So it's amazing how this plant, again, how we as a community, esta planta nos une. It always brings unity and brings us together. So, to close, based on your experience, what advice, qué consejos would you give women who want to, be part of the cannabis industry? ¿Qué consejos le darías a mujeres que quieren emprender en la industria del cannabis?
Sí. Bueno, honestly, like, putting yourself out there, that's just really like going to events, that was also one of the things, like, obviously, post COVID, once things started to pop up, and even in virtual events, right? Like showing up to those and like making, like showing up really, because that's how you get to meet people, right? It's like, if I would have never shown up to that High Garden brunch, like I wouldn't have met you at that time. And like, we probably would have done this at some point, but it's like, it's so beautiful that this gets to happen now, that like, I'm like feeling ready and clear now, so it's like for folks to just show up, like not be afraid to reach out to people either, because I know like in the beginning, that's something that I would feel a little bit shy about. It's like, oh, I don't want to like DM this person. They're probably getting like a million DMs. They're going to be like, who the fuck is this person? Right. But it's like, no, absolutely. Like, as long as you're like authentic and genuine and, super respectful and whatnot, it's like people remember that, and people see that. And like, that's one thing that I'll say. It's like, because I haven't been afraid to show up and to like reach out and to ask and to be vulnerable and to be like, like, hey, like this is who I am, this is what I do, and like I admire and love your work, and like would love to see what happens in some capacity, like if that feels like, like if there's like alignment, right? It's like you really literally never know. And there's so many things that are happening now, for example, for me, that like I would have never guessed or thought would have be happening by now. But it's like, oh yeah, it's happening because like for the past 2 years, like I've been showing up, I've been doing, I've been like, so that persistence, right? Like even when it gets difficult, I think like that's one of the biggest things that I want to share with folks, is like, even when it gets difficult and you feel like you just want to quit, because that happens. I mean, Francis, eso pasa, ¿verdad? Like it happens.
Eso pasa,
it's inevitable, ¿verdad? It's like it's inevitable when you are someone who's like, on a path, on a mission to like create something or like enter into spaces, right? And just really believing in self and trusting, in timing, right? Todo en su tiempo. Like something may not happen like right now, but like you never know how that transpires later on. And often it's right in ways, even to events, like ask questions, like educate yourselves. That's another big thing, like this might be a little, spicy opinion, but I'm just going to say it. Like, as much as I love seeing all these different, cannabis programs pop up in colleges and universities, which I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic that people now have the option to enter college and be like, yeah, I'm going to major in like cannabinoids or this or that or whatever. That's great. But also, a la misma vez, that's still such a fucking barrier, because since the beginning of time, right? Like no one has had to have a degree in weed. You know what I'm saying? Like folks have been educating and advocating for this for so fucking long. So when we're talking about like barriers to entry into the business, right? Even into schooling, all those things, like this is like still kind of part of it. Like it's a beautiful thing and a beautiful opportunity. And I love that for folks, but also it's like the awareness that like many folks won't be able to go through that, right? Because of like, hello, like going to university, like we live in America, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah, that's one of the barriers. And
right. But like self-education, like that's super important, like me being able to like argue with my former doctor. They're no longer my doctor, but when I was honest and open, for example, like about my cannabis use, right? Because as a patient, when they're asking you questions, right, you want to try to be like, it's in our best interest to be honest, so we can get the support that we need. But at the same token, right, for many folks, right, for LGBTQ plus folks, you know, which is also my community, right, in the medical field, there's stigma, right? If you're known to use cannabis, right, there's stigma, right? You're labeled as a drug user. So like me having the knowledge where he really didn't, because he was this old school Italian man that clearly had no fucking clue. I was like, wow, would you look at that? Like, this is supposed to be the person with the PhD and all the years of experience and training, and they don't know jack shit. And I could literally fucking teach him a whole fucking, you know, right now about this shit. And like, this is why people are also afraid to be open. But it's like, the more of us that educate ourselves and are able to prove, like, actually, no, this is actually what happens. Like, science has proven this. And like, you know, all of that, like that for me personally, at least, was super empowering to like have the education to like
stand up, to your doctor.
And you don't have to be an expert, right? Like, I know it can feel overwhelming entering any sort of business, because you really have to, like, you have to learn things, especially when you're new. Like, I'm a baby, you know, I'm fully aware of that. Like, I'm a baby in this space, but like, my voice is also valid, you know. And I think, like, I know when I was entering too, I was like, oh no, like, do I? Because there's all these other amazing people who've been doing this and doing amazing things. But it's like, no, like, your voice is valid, your experience is valid. Like, if you have the vision, like, if you have, you know, that genuine, like, care for this plant that you want to share in whatever way that is, right? Because sometimes we don't know what it looks like, right? Like, sometimes you're like, no, I know I want to enter this space, but maybe I don't know where. But like, again, that's why the more that you show up to different things, right? Like, show up to the licensing, you know, classes, right? Like, check in the Office of Cannabis Management, you know, well, that's what we have here in New York, the Office of Cannabis Management, and they do you know, like, different updates every month on like what's going on, you know, with them, you know, with the upcoming market, and, you know, rules, regulations, stuff like that. Like, really grabbing information from those things is going to help us really be able to shape things in a much better way and advocate for ourselves, especially as women, right? Like, we know women are grossly underpaid. Like, we know that we face, you know, all this fucking bullshit, especially like as brown women, right? Afro-Latina, todo eso. Like, the cards are just stacked, but it's like, we're just breaking that shit down. Like, we're breaking
we have
happening. Yeah, like the women in weed here in New York are like amazing. I mean, you experienced, you know, some of it. Like, you see, it's like we are here, like, and going, and it's, you know, and supporting each other. I would say that, like, support and respect, like, goes a long way, you know. Like, none of that, you know, sabotaging shit, because unfortunately, even in the cannabis, like, at the end of the day, like, it's a business, and it's a money grab for a lot of people. And, you know, there's a lot of great people who are like in it, you know, for the right reasons. There's a lot of people who, like, you know,
that's why it's so important, like you said, align with the right people, because again, the energy and manifesting and like you said, being persistent and consistent in showing up, that's such a great advice, because at the end of the day, in the long run, you're just acquiring that knowledge and experience that no one can take that from you, and you could just provide it, you know, that as a tool, become a subject matter expert, and become a voice for your community. And that's something that
the community part. Yeah, like, it doesn't have to, it's like, it could be as simple as, like, when I was teaching my mom about, you know, how cannabis works in the body, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it like, I feel like sometimes we think it has to be like this crazy big, like, out, and it's like, no, it's literally like, you could be that teacher in your family, and they may or may not change their mind, right? Like, half of my family gets it and half of them don't. I don't care either way. Yo hago lo que yo hago, you know, like, it helps me. Like, I continue to educate and elevate, and, you know, yo siempre estoy esa tipa en la familia que viene como, like, no habla de cannabis, no habla de, ustedes saben what I'm saying. It's like, I'm that person. Like, don't, like, okay, don't
get her started.
Nobody asked about it. Like, shut up. But I'm like, hey guys, did you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, again, like, shifting the stigma and the ideas as much as possible. And not everybody is gonna be on board, but it's like, as long as we can, you know, like whether you like it or not, it's like, here's what it is. And like for us to continue to ignore the facts that this isn't a life destroying, you know, substance the way that it's painted out to be, you know, when we start acknowledging that this plant could actually like support the planet and how it regenerates soil and all that, like there's so many issues that we are living through and going through that could be resolved if cannabis was federally legalized, descheduled, decriminalized, right? Folks, you know, records were expunged, right? Like, you know, giving, you know, access and equity, right, and equality, like to folks trying to enter the space, right? Because it's like even the applications are like tens of thousands of dollars. Who has that lying around?
And that's a barrier. That's a community barrier that it's 100%. Being presented.
100%. Because what is equity when it's like, oh, okay, cool, $10,000 just to submit this thing, which I'm not even going to get back, whether or not I get approved. Like, it's bananas. It's bananas. You know, like New York is definitely doing a lot to try to get it right, and like really putting equity at the forefront. You know, with the MRTA legislation. But you know, it's again we see the world that we live in, right? Where like it's always been profit over people. You know, my concern, unfortunately, which is like very real, is like, you know, that this will turn into big canna, right? Because it's like, you know, big pharma, big canna, right? The money grab and, you know, not doing things right. And it's like, it's so important for us to fight for like the plant, to fight for the people, to fight for farmers, right? Because like that's also the thing. It's like the folks who have been cultivating this plant forever, right? Who then don't get to do it, right? Because again, all the, like it's just the system just sets us up, especially Black and brown people, up for failure. But that's like why now more than ever, it's even more important that like when these legislations are like, you know, they're being cooked up and like passing or not passing or going to the floor and being voted on, that like the devil's in the details. Like we really need to see what's the in between and like ask questions, like not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to be like, whoa, like you said equity, but like where's the equity when like look at XYZ? Like how can we change this to make sure that it's at, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's a nonstop like conversation and fight and, you know, just community support. Like that's one thing I'll say. I'm very blessed with the community that I have here. You know, luckily, like I don't allow myself to, or maybe it's just my ancestors and protectors that don't allow myself to align with like shitty energy or shitty people, you know, in the space. Like it's all been super amazing. All the women that I've met in this space have been nothing but supportive and kind and like kind of like taken me under their wing as well. You know, and helping me like be able to do things like this, you know, like I love talking, you know, I love talking. I could talk my head off forever and ever. Like I love sharing, I love connecting with people. And it's like find yourself a really great community that feels right. You know, it's like it's do that, like find that community. And that's also gonna like help empower you to like enter the space and also get clarity on like what that looks like for you, right? Because maybe you want to be a bud tender, maybe you want to open up a dispensary, maybe you want to be a teacher, maybe you want to be a cannabis pharmacist, maybe you want to be a baker, you know, and having like the limit does not exist, you know, and we can all learn from each other and grow from each other because, you know, uno nunca sabe, like you bring me onto this and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh yeah, I know Frances Gonzalez that's doing this. And, you know, and that's how stuff happens. Like that's literally how it happens.
That's how magic happens. And that's the beauty of the community that we have, that we just help empower each other. And like you say, there's so many barriers and we need to look for community. That's why Latinas Cannabis, we're focused on Latinas cannabis entrepreneurs, because we know it's hard. And sometimes like we wonder like, why am I doing this? But then you get direction and then you see all the comments and all the support that, hey, there's a reason why we're doing this. Is the reason why we have to, you know, do advocacy, be involved with our politicians, with our public, with servants, because they're the ones that make the decision at the end of the day. And if we're not involved, and I know some people like, I was one of the ones like, politics, what? No. But if you really want to make a change, you really have to push the politicians, your senators, your legislators, what are they doing? For example, here in Puerto Rico, there's a project which I was mentioning to you earlier. In Puerto Rico, we have medical since 2017, and now one of legislators is submitting a project for adult use. So again, that's why we need to get involved, be advocate, know what's going on, like know our regulations. And it's such, a great job that you're able to, through tus dones, be able to, of being a creative, a writer, to incorporate that and provide that education to the community. So Samantha, how do we find out about you, your upcoming events, your communication channels?
Yes. So Instagram, follow me on Instagram, Love Music Yoga. The link in bio has, so many goodies, podcasts that I've spoken on about like cannabis and spirituality, my yoga classes, writing pieces. You can find everything there as well. That'll pretty much be the best place. And my website, www.love-wellness.com. That's also in the link in my bio. So just go to IG. Everything's gonna be there. You'll see everything. And
Amazing. Thank you so much, Samantha, for estar con nosotros en la noche de hoy. We love to hear your empowering story, your journey. Like I always say, everyone has their origin story. Todas tenemos nuestra historia de origen when it comes to cannabis. And I love to see women thrive and be successful in the cannabis space. So gracias desde, New York. We hopefully will see each other soon. We have the Women Cannabis
aquí o en Puerto Rico. Tengo que ir a Puerto Rico.
Sí, tienes que venir para acá.
Tal vez un poquito de yoga con...
Claro, en la playa.
Sí, la playa, todo, go hiking, everything.
Sí.
But thank you so much, and thank you everyone watching. Muchísimas gracias a todos, muchísimas gracias Frances por la oportunidad. Gracias.
Gracias, belleza, por estar con nosotros. Mucho amor y mucho cariño. Esa fue Samantha Martins, ella de Nueva York. Ella es una afro-latina en la industria del cannabis. Y ahora vamos a tener una pequeña proyección de Women Grow de Gia Morón. Ella también es otra afro-latina en la industria del cannabis en Nueva York. Y ella es presidenta de lo que es Women Grow, una de las organizaciones nacionales que ayuda a mujeres a conectar en la industria del cannabis. Y Gia, pues, ha sido colaboradora y una increíble apoyo para Latinas Emprendiendo. Y hoy la tenemos como afro-latina también en nuestro espacio. Así que ella nos dejó un videíto para compartir.
Good evening. My name is Gia Morone, and I am president of Women Grow. It is an honor to be here with you this evening. Thank you so much, Frances, for this invitation. You know how much we love and admire Latinas Emprendiendo, and Women Grow has had a long history and relationship with this organization, and we're so proud of you. It's an honor, again, for me to even speak to you during Black History Month as an Afro-Latina. Yes, my family does reign from the island of Puerto Rico. My grandmother is actually from Cataño, but I'm here in New York, and I'm here on the stateside. And what's interesting is I didn't find the cannabis industry until sometime around 2012, 2013, when I started learning about it. And it was interesting because my journey into the industry, I'll actually take you in the reverse. While I found Women Grow and I attended my first Women Grow meeting in 2015, I'm not the founder of Women Grow. I actually found my first meeting in New York in 2015. And I was so surprised by the number of people that were at the meetings. And so I started attending meetings. I then started working with the New York market of Women Grow. And then from there, I moved into the headquarters And by 2018 had become senior vice president, invested into the company, and by 2019 becoming president. And but prior to that, and in conjunction with being president of Women Grow, I also have another company, and it's called GVM Communications, and it's a PR branding business development firm. And I've had that firm since April 20th, 2012, which is pretty funny because when I launched the company, I was not aware of the significance of 420. And little did I know that I would end up in the cannabis industry. And I have no regrets. And so while I started GVM Communications in 2012, I actually had taken on my first cannabis and hemp clients in 2015, because really by then, that's when I really started immersing myself into the industry. And what I realized, and it was by going to Women Grow events, that someone told me that the work I was already doing, I can do in the industry. And that's exactly what I did. And so I have an incredible team of consultants and freelancers that work with me on GVM Communications. I'm proud to say that we were ranked in 2019 and 2020 in Forbes and in Green Market Report as one of the leading PR firms in the cannabis and hemp space. So we look forward to being ranked again sometime soon. We'll keep working hard toward it. But prior to that, I worked in the corporate space on Wall Street for 15 years doing communications. And then before that, I was in the corporate entertainment space at a television production and distribution company, again, doing communications. And what I've realized all this time is that all my experience that I've had leading up to this point has helped me in the industry. And so I'm sharing that with you to say, I don't know what you're doing or what your prior experience is, but if you are looking to get into the industry, consider doing what you currently know or what you're good at. And even if you're looking to grow into other spaces, that's fine. Get into the industry first, apply your skill sets, do what you know best to then help yourself become more educated and then grow into other spaces, right? Because that's what I feel like I'm doing now. I'm growing into other spaces, and it's been an incredible ride. It's not an easy one, I will tell you that. It requires a commitment, but it's worth it. It really is. It's worth it. I don't care where you are in terms of being on the island of Puerto Rico, being in Canada, being in the States, being in Europe, wherever. Cannabis is global. And with it being global, we're all bricklayers in building the blueprint of this industry. And what I love and what I know and what I stand behind are the women and the women's contributions that we're making to this industry. We're on the front lines of being advocates. We're pushing legislation through. We're leading businesses. We're helping to build businesses. And women are the true foundation of this industry. As you know, the plant is female, right? Or at least the part that we really use is the female side of the plant. And so I say that to say that I'm not sure who's listening or who this is for, but please know that you are needed. Please know that representation does matter. Please know that your experience and your skill sets, no matter what it is absolutely needed in this space. But as a proud Afro-Latina, and I represent myself no matter where I go, it's so important that we do identify ourselves, that we do look to work with other women, not only of other backgrounds and cultures, but also within our own ethnicity. Why? Because the representation of Black and Latinas in this industry is relatively low. And so this is that invitation for more women to come into the industry, bring your expertise, bring your culture, bring your whole self here, and add the value that I already know that you are in your worth into the space, helping us to build a great and leading industry. So Frances, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you. I love what you do. You know, anytime that I can be supportive of you, I absolutely will. And, you know, during this Black History Month that you are observing, the Afro-Latinas in cannabis, please know that we're here. Please know that we represent and that we stand proud. And please know that we have so much more work to do. And in order to get a lot more work done, we need you. We need all of us to work together. And I'm grateful to be a part of it. Thank you so much. Much love to everyone. And next month is Women's History Month. Yay! The love just keeps going. Thank you. Good night.
Wow, qué hermosas palabras de verdad de Gia. Ella ha sido una supporter de Latinas Canapreneurs. Ella, pues, como comentó, como presidenta de Women Grow, todo ese crecimiento y la representación, because es bien importante, representation matters. Es muy importante sentirse representado en la industria del cannabis y qué mejor manera de ser inclusivo, y por eso este mes, en celebración a el mes de Black History Month, queríamos resaltar a diferentes afrolatinas en la industria del cannabis. Así que le damos las gracias a Samantha, a Gia y a Tamara, pues, por su compromiso y por su apoyo a Latinas Canapreneurs. También, pues, aprovecho para recordarles que les invitamos el próximo jueves a nuestros Ambassadors Live, donde tenemos a nuestras embajadoras. Este año tenemos embajadoras en México, Colombia, en Ecuador, en Perú, en Argentina, en Estados Unidos, en Colorado, en Puerto Rico. O sea, estamos bien agradecidas por nuestras embajadoras, así que conozcan más sobre ellas en nuestros Ambassadors Live por Instagram de Latinas Canapreneurs. Y también, pues, les invito a que nos acompañen el último viernes de cada mes a nuestros Virtual Meetups, donde estaremos resaltando a 3 emprendedoras en la industria del cannabis de Latinoamérica. Vamos a tener a 3 diferentes emprendedoras que nos van a inspirar, educar y elevar, resaltando su trayectoria, retos y decisión de emprender en la industria del cannabis. Así que gracias a todos por acompañarnos en la noche de hoy. Van a estar esta información también en nuestro website, latinascanapreneurs.com, y le damos gracias a nuestros sponsors, aliados y colaboradores por estar apoyándonos en nuestra misión de inspirar, educar y elevar. Así que gracias a todos, que pasen buenas noches.